Hi fiber friends, it's Marianne from Yarnwork Studio and I'm back with part 4 of the knitting process video series where I'm talking through and showing how I plan out, prepare, make any decisions along the way, modifications, whatever it is, for hand knitting a sweater. And the sweater I've chosen to knit is called the Douglas Cardi, and you can go back and watch the whole series to see sort of where I'm coming from, what I chose for yarn. We've covered making a swatch, blocking a swatch. Now we're going to talk about, after we've blocked our swatch, how do we know if we got gauge, and we're going to talk like all about gauge. So without further ado, this is where we left off in part 3. We let this to dry overnight. And now I'm simply going to pull these little T-pins off. And again, the point of blocking your swatch, which is letting it soak in water with some wool wash, the same way you would finish your sweater, will let you know what the finished measurements of that sweater are going to be. Because after the stitches sort of settle and the yarn kind of has a chance to bloom, it all makes a big difference in how the sweater will feel, how the fabric will drape. So the things I'm looking for, I'm going to calculate my gauge on here compared to the pattern, and that will help me decide if I need to do another swatch and try something else. I also just take a look and feel the drape of the fabric. How would I like that against my skin? You know, do I like the way that it's sitting, feeling? Do the stitches look pretty even? Are they too loose? Which, if you remember from the intro in part 1, I knit my first Douglas Cardi way too loose because I hadn't really learned about tension yet. And we can get into tension in one of these future videos as well. But I love the way it looks. I love the way it drapes. I don't think it's too loose. I'm just kind of holding up against the window here. It's not too loose. It's not too dense. So yeah, I think this is great fabric for me if it works on the gauge side. So again, we had written down in part 3, I'll get the card out, what the target gauge is. And remember, gauge is, let me focus here, low production value, remember? Okay, the gauge is how many stitches across in a 4-inch period and how many rows, so this way, in a 4-inch period. So it's looking at a 4-inch square and how many sort of stitches across and stitches up. And the target for this sweater, so if we make it exactly to pattern and we get exactly what the gauge is and we knit it consistently, then the finished garment will be exactly as intended, size-wise. So this is the target. Before I blocked it, I measured it and I had 19.5 stitches and 28 rows, which is close to these numbers, but not exactly. Now that I've blocked it, which gives the fiber a chance to expand, we're going to count it again. So again, I've got my gauge ruler. Any ruler will do as long as it's flat and accurate. You want to be laying it also on a flat surface, not trying to count it around. And then you're trying to get the middle of your swatch. So don't start right on the edge because sometimes we knit tighter or looser on edges. That's why we make it bigger than a 4-inch square. So you don't want to just make it the size. Like you don't want to just cast on 18 stitches. If the gauge is 18, you want to cast on more. I cast on 30. Okay. I think I cast on 30, something like that. Okay. So again, I'm counting the V's. So each knit stitch is a V. And your gauge swatch is always in the pattern. The pattern should tell you what the stitch is that you should use for it. So in this case, it's stockinette, which is knit on the front, purl on the wrong side. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, so my post block gauge is 19 stitches by... And I'm just using a little tapestry needle to help me count because it can get, my eyes can cross a little bit when I'm staring at the stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Okay, So when we break this down and look at it, like the question is, so what? So after I block it, it's 19 stitches and 28 rows. And in the pattern itself, in the gauge note, it says measured over stockinette stitch, knit flat after blocking. So I have one extra stitch in each direction, across and up. So there are a few options that you can choose to do here. And I'm talking about my process. Other people might have a different process. But to me, when I see something like this, which says basically, I'm very close, but because this number is bigger, I'm putting more stitches in a smaller area. If I knit something to size, to the exact size in the pattern, and say it was like 100 stitches wide, that means that my 100 stitches wouldn't quite get the full width it's supposed to get. It would be a little bit shorter. So overall, if I knit this to size, everything's going to be a tiny bit smaller. And I can calculate exactly how much smaller. All I'm going to do, I don't have a calculator on my iPad. So I'll do it over here. 1 second, please. Low production value for the win. All I'm going to do is so it's supposed to be 18 stitches and I'm doing 19 and 4 inches. So that's about 95%, or what you call it is 5% smaller. So if we knit the same thing as the pattern designer, the size would be, a certain size. And then if I knit the same thing using this needle and this fabric and block it, I'm going to be only 95% of that. So I'm going to be 5% smaller than that, which I can choose to do. So I can choose a size based on that needs to be within my general size range. Like you can't go pick a wildly inappropriate size because your gauge is off. But when it's really close like this, I could choose to do that and just factor that in when I'm choosing a size, which we'll talk about in a second. The other option is for me to go up a needle size, because when you go up a needle size, your stitches are a little bit bigger. And that way it'll stretch out a little bit more and hopefully end up at 18. So if you'll remember, I used a 4.5 millimeter or US 7 size needles for this. And I could go up to a 5 millimeter or US 8 and do another gauge swatch and compare that to this. So if I could get exactly 18 stitches and 27 rows, then it'd be perfect. So let me see where to go next. So those are sort of my two options. If I had it bang on, it'd be great. There'd be no question. But because it's not bang on, the question is, do I just factor that in when I'm picking my size, or do I reknit the swatch in a higher needle size, bigger needle size, so that I can get a smaller number of stitches and see if I can get it exactly to gauge? So what I'm going to do first, as I make this decision, again, I'm trying to show you the whole process and think it through the way that I think things through. I'm going to look at the pattern. And again, I'm not giving away any pattern secrets. This is all the publicly available info for the pattern. If you want to make this with me, go buy the pattern. This is not an ad. This is not sponsored. This is just me saying go buy it if you want to make it. I'm not going to give away pattern details, that's for sure, because the pattern designers work so hard for these. Okay, so I'm looking at, just zoomed it in, so hopefully you can maybe see it. The link should be below as well. Okay, so the sizes here. What I love about Andrea's patterns is she's very clear on what the finished bust circumference is. So you look at the sizes, they just have numbers to help you keep track of which is which. Finished bust circumference. So this is going to tell you how wide it is, sort of at its widest part, which is usually for most people, it's around the chest area and what that circumference is. But you're trying to find sort of the largest section of your bust and measure that. And then it's telling you what the finished sweater will be in inches. And then the recommended ease is positive 16 to 10, which I'm going to read it as 10 to 16 inches because that's how my brain works. So it wants you to take your bust size. So for me, my bust size is 42. And it wants you to then add between 10 and 16 inches of positive ease, which means it's going to be that much bigger. So I should be targeting a finish knit that's between 52, which is my bust plus 10, and 58 inches. And that's how I should be choosing my size. And it depends. Some people can go to the higher end if they like things a little more baggy. One of my issues that I had when I first knit this one, when I was still a very, very, very beginner sweater knitter. So I made all sorts of mistakes. But one of the mistakes was I didn't pick the right size and I made it way too baggy for what I liked. So I'm going to end more in the sort of 10 to 12 range is what I'm going to aim for. So I want something that's in the 52 to 54 inch bust range. And so we can see here, there is one that's 54 inches, but I also need to remember if I choose to use this needle, based on this gauge swatch, and that when I knit, it's going to actually end up being a bit smaller than intended. And hopefully this math is making sense for you. Sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around it. But because I'm squeezing 19 stitches in where 18 should go, then it's going to end up a bit smaller. It's going to end up 5% smaller. So if I made this one that's supposed to be 54 inches and factor my gauge, it's actually only going to be 51 inches. So that's a size option. There's also 56 inches here. 56 inches, all I'm doing is multiplying it by 0.95 because that's sort of the ratio of my gauge, the effective gauge to my gauge. That's going to make it 53 inches wide. So for me, I feel like I would be comfortable doing the size that's 56 inches because it's going to end up being 53 inches. And I am just going to check the next one, which is 60, and see how many inches that should finish at. 57, which is okay in the range. But really for me, I think I'm going to knit this size 4 here, which is going to give me a finished garment that'll be a little more close to what a size 3 is. So that's what I would do if I want to move forward with this fabric and not do another gauge swatch, which I'll figure out which one I'm going to do. I'm not sure which one I'm going to do yet, because I might try this at 5 millimeters, but I'm worried it might be a little bit loose. And I like the denseness of this fabric. It's not too dense, like it doesn't make it thick, but it makes it not very holey. And the tension on my last one, it was a very loose knit. So that's how you kind of can pick your size based on your gauge. If it was bang on, I would probably do a size 3 if my gauge exactly matched the pattern. But because it doesn't, I'm going to do a size 4. And the other thing to think about, and I think this is important, I do modifications quite a bit, so it comes sort of naturally to me with the way that my brain works. But when you don't go to the size that you need to go to, like the size that I should be making, my true size should be a size 3 with the ease I want. When you're going off of that size, don't go more than like 1 off of it, or else you're going to have problems, I would say, with, the armhole depth, or like the yoke length, which is from your neck to your armpits, or your neck hole size. Like there's all sorts of other factors that factor into the size. It's not just about, find the right bust that's going to work for your size based on your gauge. If your gauge is far off, mine is close, but if it's very far off, you're not just going to be like, I'll just knit a size 8 when I should normally wear a size 4, because the scaling and grading will be off entirely. So that's just a little word of caution. I will probably decide what I'm going to do today. And in the next video, we will be casting on for the project. And then we'll talk about things like, how am I going to choose the order of the stripes of these beautiful colors? What sorts of factors am I thinking about while I'm casting on? Things like that. So stay tuned for the next part of the series. And as always, toss comments in if you have questions so I can answer them along the way as we continue to build the videos, because this series is going to take I don't know, a month at least for me to knit up this sweater. So we've got time, and that way it can add as much value as possible to everybody. Thanks for watching. I hope you all have a great day.